Let's talk about the room you're not yet in. For some of you, that's a literal room. The board meeting, the investor briefing, the conversation that happens at the level above you where decisions get made that shape your organization and your career. For others, it's more of a metaphor, the level of credibility and influence where people seek out your perspectives rather than just your report. Whether you're consulted, not just informed, where your view on a strategic question carries real weight with the most senior people in your orbit, becoming a trusted advisor to this room, to a board, is one of those topics that sounds like it belongs in a very specific career stage. The almost CEO, the incoming CXO, the woman who's one step from the C-suite. And it does apply there. But that misses something important I see tripping up women I work with every day. The behaviors, the habits, the communication patterns that make someone a trusted advisor at board level are not developed the week before you need them. They're built over years. And the woman who's a director today, who starts building those patterns now, will find herself genuinely ready when the moment comes, not scrambling to understand a room she's never really studied. You're more likely to be invited for a one-off ad hoc presentation to the board. You're more likely to be asked to contribute to a board deck before you're actually facing the board yourself. And you're more likely to be mentioned by the people in front of the board in the first place if you've done this work. This episode of Leading Women in Tech is for 3 different people. The first of you is actively working towards that C-suite role. You know the board relationship is your frontier. The second group of you is considering a fractional role, non-executive director roles or an encore career of some description, and you need to understand what board level credibility actually looks like and how you build it. And then the third group of you is earlier in your careers. And you're thinking, why am I listening to this? Please stick with me. I wish all of us did this earlier. And you're listening to this with one part of your mind on the future. And you're going to take away some of the most practical, useful content in this episode for getting there faster, for having the influence as you go, and not coming to somebody like me in a panic at the point you're like, I need to start doing board presentations and I have no idea how, or I've just been put in front of a board and I fell flat and they've told me I'm not going again. Let's talk about what you can start doing right now. So let's dive on in. Before we do anything else, let's talk about what it means to be a trusted advisor at board level, because the conventional picture is often wrong, and getting it wrong leads people to work on the wrong things. The conventional picture is something like this. Their trusted advisor is the most senior person in the room, or the one with the most credentials, or the one who has been around longest. Seniority equals credibility, at least in our heads. Experience equals trust, again, in our heads. That's not how it actually works. And if you spend any time in or near a boardroom, you'll know that some of the most senior people in those rooms are not trusted advisors. They're information providers. They present, they report, they answer questions. And some of the most influential people in those conversations are not the most senior. They're the ones with the clearest thinking, the most useful framing, and the capacity to help the board see something they couldn't see without them. The trusted advisor doesn't just bring information, she helps people think. And that distinction is really we're spending some time to sit with, because it changes how we approach this. It changes how you prepare yourself, how you communicate, how you build the relationships that make this kind of influence possible. A board, or any senior leadership group for that matter, is usually made up of highly capable people who have an enormous amount of information and not nearly enough time to think carefully about all of it. What they most need is not more information. They need someone who can synthesize it, frame the real question, and help them see the choices clearly. Someone who can say, here's what I actually think is going on. Here's the question I think we need to consider. Here's the question I think we need to answer. Here's my view on how to think about it. That person is the trusted advisor, and she is invaluable, and I want that to be you. The executive presence work I've covered in many previous episodes, particularly the shift from tactical to strategic communication, is the foundation of all of this. If you haven't listened to those, go to the show notes. I've linked a couple of episodes there for you because we're building on that today. What you need to do is get the executive presence in place, and then you build what we're going to talk about today that makes the real shift. Specifically, how to develop and demonstrate the kind of thought leadership that makes senior people want your perspective rather than just your reporting. So let's talk about what boards are actually looking for. Not the official version that's written in a job description, the real version, the reality of what it's like to sit in front of a board, because the gap is significant and most people are working on the wrong things as a result. If you ask a peer, like, what do I need to do to learn to be a board person? Like, how do I get started? They'll tell you the factual stuff, the official version. Boards want strategic thinking, relevant expertise, financial literacy, good governance instincts. All very true. The real version, boards want someone who makes their job easier. I think that applies to everything in our careers, but it's really, really important at the board level, because you've got to understand what makes the board's life easier is not the same as what makes your peer's life easier or your CEO's life easier. Who makes the complexity navigable at this level? The person who brings clarity to situations where the natural human tendency, even among very smart people, very experienced people, is often to default to familiarity to avoid the uncomfortable conclusions or to get lost in operational detail. We want the person who brings clarity when other people feel they need to stick in safety. I think this is one of the reasons why boards are sometimes have a bit of a bad reputation, because their job is to come to uncomfortable conclusions, is to push directions. Now, I often think when they make bad decisions, then they do, they're often doing it because they're not getting the right information from the people that will give the information to the board about the business. But in practice, what it really means to be at the board level, to be the trusted advisor to the board, comes down to 5 things. Number 1, pattern recognition across domains. And this is why at the C-level, one of the most important jobs at the C-level is actually to step out of your zone of genius, is to work with your peers, because you see things because you're not an expert in their domain that they don't see, and vice versa. So part of the job of the board is to step out of domains. The most trusted advisors at board level are not the deepest functional experts. They're the people who can see patterns across functions, across organizations, across industries. And that's a biggie right now. The people who can say, I've seen this dynamic before in a different context. Here's what it usually means. That perspective is rarer than it should be and extraordinarily useful. It's built by the deliberate broadening of your exposure beyond your own function, by being curious about how other parts of the organization work, what other industries are doing, what the research says about the dynamics you're seeing. And I've covered this before. Go check out the show notes for episode 238, moving from firefighter to strategist. That one really, really helps. Go check out that episode. I was like, I'm going to be doing this every episode moving forward. There's so much stuff that's all linked together now that we're like 300 episodes in, that's really worth like making sure that you link up these components as we work through material. Okay. Thing number 2, the ability to frame the right question. Asking the right question is such an important tool in any setting. And often we ask the wrong question, myself included. Most people walk into a board level conversation ready to answer questions. We go fully prepared. The trusted advisor walks in ready to frame the questions. There's a profound difference between presenting a solution and helping a group identify what question they're actually trying to answer. This is when I realized I was supposed to be a coach, because asking the right question is kind of the job of a coach as well. Helping a group come to a really profound realization through questions is brilliant. Boards get given solutions all the time. Now, I know you've heard me say before, be the solutions person, not the problem person. That is very true. But someone who can say, I don't think that's actually the question. Here's what I think we need to resolve first, is doing something genuinely valuable and something I do not see done enough. Okay, the third thing we should actually be doing at the board level is intellectually being honest under pressure. Boards are full of people who are used to being right, used to having their views deferred to, and often, consciously or not, surrounding themselves with people who confirm their existing thinking. The advisor who is willing to bring a different view, to say, I think we're missing something here, to hold a position under pushback, is the one who gets asked back. Not because she's difficult, because she is genuinely useful. This is much harder than it sounds. It requires a particular kind of confidence, not the confidence of certainty, but the confidence of a well-reasoned position. And it requires the communication skills to hold that position without becoming defensive or adversarial. Okay, the fourth thing you need to be doing is having executive listening. This is one of the most underrated capabilities in any senior leadership context, and it's particularly relevant in a board or advisory setting. Most people in high-stakes conversations are so focused on what they're going to say that they miss what's actually happening in the room. The trusted advisor is watching and listening at multiple levels simultaneously. What's being said, what's not being said, which concerns are being voiced and which are being suppressed, whether real disagreement lies beneath the surface consensus. If you can help the executive team and the board set priorities, you are going to go further faster, and that is done through executive listening. And if you aren't having the right conversations, the conversations that actually matter, you aren't bringing the full attention to them that needs to happen. Okay, the fifth and final thing, reliability and discretion. Trust is built through consistency over time. And this is an executive presence skill as well. The person who is reliably prepared, reliably honest, reliably available when the situation is difficult, that person earns trust in a way that no other impressive performance can replicate. Actually makes me think of a particular client I've worked with for years. She is a C-something-O. And she has worked in a lot of private equity funded owned businesses in the time that I've known her. She's worked in several because she's gone through several acquisitions. And she has been kept on each time because the board is obviously primarily made up of the investors and the owners, the private equity firms. But when there's an acquisition going on, there tends to be a temporary board of some description that is made up of the two PE firms. And in each situation, she is so outstanding at being reliable in what she shows up with, being so fully prepared, being able to answer every single question, being able to answer all the questions and ask the right questions to everybody else, that she just keeps being kept on. The advisor you want to be is the one who demonstrates that confidential conversations stay confidential, that you can handle sensitive information without judgment, just like this client of mine. When you can do that, you are going to be trusted more than anybody else in the room. You become indispensable. Okay, let's now get practical, because everything I've described so far is way of thinking. And the question is, how do you translate that into the way you actually communicate in high stakes settings? The most important shift is this. Stop leading with the what and start leading with the so what. Let me explain. Most leaders in functional operational roles are trained to present information logically. Here's what we did. Here's what the data shows. Here's the situation. That's appropriate in many contexts. It's great as an interview technique, by the way. In a board, on a senior advisory context, it's the wrong structure. In fact, I would argue once you get to the executive level, it's the wrong structure. People do not need to know what you've done. The people in those rooms don't need the story that leads to the conclusion. They just need the conclusion first. And then enough of the story to verify the conclusion is sound. The structure you need as a trusted advisor looks like this. Number one, the headline. The most important thing you need them to understand or decide on, one sentence before anything else. If they don't listen to anything else, which is entirely possible, they hear this headline. Then number two, the implication. Why does this matter at the strategic level? If you've done a good job of the headline, they will care about this part. They will care about the implication. Not the operational level, the strategic level implication. What does this mean for the organization's direction, its risk, its opportunity? And then if you've done a good job on number two, they'll keep listening for number three, the choice. What are the options? What's your recommendation? Not, here are the 5 things we could do. A genuine recommendation with a clear rationale. Again, this one is so important at the executive level as well. And then finally, at this point, hopefully you've still got everybody participating in what you're saying. And so you move very quickly to the ask. What do you need from this group? A decision, input, specific question, approval to proceed. Be explicit. That's it. Headline, implication, choice, ask. That structure can feel uncomfortable if you've never used it before. But as you learn to use it, you'll start realizing you have to do a lot of work to get to this point. But at the board level, that work is assumed. What they want is your judgment, your discernment, your recommendations, your explanation when they ask for it, only when they ask for it. Executive presence is the way of cultivating this perception that you can hold these conversations. So do go check out the related episodes in the show notes, because in this context, you need to also hold yourself calmly. You need to be able to hold through these 4 points. Even when somebody interrupts you, you're only going to ask for 3 minutes of their time to get through these 4 points. So it's worth having something where you can properly hold yourself, hold that executive presence, because that is going to make the difference of whether they trust your judgment that it's worth having in the room. The second shift, though, communication, is what happens when you're challenged. The trusted advisor does not crumble under pushback or interruption. She also doesn't become rigid or defensive. She does something much more specific. She separates the challenge into 2 categories. Is this new information that should make me update my view, or is this a different perspective that I've already considered and weighed? And a lot of the time when somebody gets into our skin, we do not do that. We do not go, is this new or have I already considered it? We jump to a conclusion before we hear the entire sentence. In the first situation, we update. In the second, we hold our position clearly and without apology. That capacity to be challenged without being destabilized is one of the clearest markers of board level credibility. If you cannot be challenged without losing your train of thought, without getting defensive, without changing your communication style, we need to work on that, because that is your credibility, your ability to be challenged. There's nothing wrong with being challenged. It's a great thing. But there is a double standard. The double standard of how a woman's confidence and certainty is perceived in a senior room is real. Knowing how to navigate that, being unequivocal and clear without triggering our reactions so that we don't get named as too aggressive, is a skill, but it is learnable. And again, there's stuff in the show notes to help you with that. So let's talk about the relationships now. Because thought leadership and credibility don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in the context of specific people who have decided that your perspective is worth having. Most people don't find you by accident. Indeed, the path to board level advisory influence, whether that's within your current organization, in a non-executive director role, or in a fractional capacity, runs through a set of deliberate relationships, not networking in the transactional sense, relationship building in the genuine sense, becoming known by the right people for the right things over time. Invest in relationships before you need them. This is the most common mistake people make with board level relationship building, is starting too late. They begin thinking about these relationships when they're ready for the C-suite or the NED role. That's a non-executive director role for those of you who don't know. At which point, you're already trying to build trust in a compressed time frame with people who don't yet know who are. Now, it's a hard thing to do. It's not impossible. The best time to start is 10 years ago. The next best time to start is today. So don't think, oh gosh, I left it too late. But if you are being proactive, if you're listening to this and you're not there yet, today is the day to start this networking. If you want to build genuine, useful relationships with board members, investors, and senior advisors that are going to give you a payout 5 years from now or 10 years from now, then you need to get to know them today. You don't want to be an unknown quantity. You don't want to be somebody who's been ignored. Instead, you want to be the one who's been consistently useful, consistently reliable, consistently interesting to talk to. When an opportunity comes up, you're not just a candidate, you're the only obvious person they're considering. The best way to build relationships with a senior person is to be genuinely useful to them, not to impress them, not to ask for something, but to offer something they actually value. Always give more than you take. Same with job hunting. Aim to network all the time so that when you do need it, you've already given. And asking for an introduction to a role is just an obvious thing because you've given so much. The same thing applies here. This might be one of the most underrated things that you can do for your career is network and give value 5 years before you need to take back. Give a perspective on a challenge they've mentioned. Be specific about contributions. Be as specific as you can, as valuable as you can. Generic advice is invisible, it's unhelpful, it's just exhausting. Give targeted, well-timed usefulness so that you're memorable. That is going to make all the difference. But board level relationships are built in a specific context. Industry events, advisory groups, formal or informal senior leadership networks, speaking engagements, publications. Do not be afraid to go up to somebody at an event and introduce yourself. Being present in those contexts, not just attending, but contributing, not just listening, but sharing perspective worth remembering, is what creates the conditions for the right people to start thinking of you as someone they want in the room. Your network is one of the most important things in your career, whether it's for job hunting or this kind of work. It's built through shared intellectual engagement, and you can do it entirely on LinkedIn as well. Again, link in the show notes to an episode that will help on that. I think it's episode 256. But start as soon as you can with your networking. Don't start when you want something. Do it before you want something. And then one of the most effective ways to build that board level credibility is to make your thinking visible beyond the walls of your current role. Writing, start a Substack article, start posting on LinkedIn, thought leadership articles, create an online record, YouTube videos of how you think that people can encounter independently of knowing you personally. Speaking at conferences in your domain, contributing to industry discussions, being quoted on relevant topics in the media, all of these create the same effects. It's not a mistake that a lot of the people at C-suite and board level have public visibility. Because ultimately, when you're at that level, you are speaking on behalf of a company. So you only get appointed to that level if people think, yeah, I wouldn't mind putting her up in front of this group in order to speak on our behalf. Gives you credibility. And at the same time, you're building your credibility as somebody who knows what she's talking about. The question is not whether you have something worth saying. You do. If you've been leading in tech for any significant time, you really do. The question is whether you're choosing to say it and say it in a way that reaches the people who need to hear it. So let's now talk about the listener who's earlier in her career. If that's you, the director who's not quite a VP, maybe you're just landing your first VP title, but it's a small company, you're like, I'm not thinking about boards yet. Then you might not be thinking this is irrelevant, but hopefully you've listened to me so far and thought, I need to start. Here's what I want you to know. The seeds of board level credibility are planted years before you harvest them. So today is your day. Most leaders focus exclusively on the room they're in, the team, the function, their peer group. If you're the woman building towards board level credibility, though, if it's in 5 or 10 years, you need to also be studying the room above you. How does the CEO think about strategy? What does the CFO care about the most? What questions are the board asking? Even if you're not in the room, can you find out? You don't need to be in all these rooms to start understanding them. Annual reports, earning calls, leadership speeches, industry commentary from senior executives. All of these give you a picture of how thinking happens at the level above yours. And the leader who's already understanding that level when she steps into it has such a huge advantage over the ones who are figuring it out in real time. Believe me, I've seen it so many times. If you can figure it out before you're there, one, it's easy to have a conversation about the promotion or the next level conversation in an external company. And two, when you land there, you're not so overwhelmed. Don't get me wrong, it's always overwhelming getting that promotion or stepping into a completely new role at a new level in a new company. But there are some people who are more prepared for it than others without having done the job. Then every meeting, every email, every update is an opportunity to practice the communication shift, leading with the so what, not the what. Frame your inputs in terms of organizational impact, not functional activity. Connect your work to the strategic priorities of the people above you. These are habits, and habits take time to build. The leader who starts building them at the director level will have them embedded by the time she's in the room where they matter the most. And then we talk about cross-functional relationships. Board level credibility is cross-functional by definition. Board members and senior advisors are looking for people who understand the whole organization, not just one piece of it over here that you've grown up in. The most direct way to build that understanding and to be seen as someone who has it is to invest deliberately in relationships outside your function. One genuine cross-functional relationship built per quarter over 5 years means you are going to be genuinely distinctive by the time you get here. As I said, I'm really talking to the ladies listening right now who are at the director level and who have 5 years. But if you are higher up and you're like, I want that in a year's time, start today. You just got to do it at a faster pace. And then let's talk about volunteering for the kind of work that's going to make you visible. In most organizations, there is work that reaches the board level. Strategic reviews, major change programs, investor updates, governance initiatives. And there are people in those organizations who are involved in that work and people who are not. The earlier you put yourself in the path of board visible work, the earlier you start building the track record and the relationships that board level credibility requires. You don't have to lead it, you just have to be in it. The habit of bringing a different view, of naming the thing nobody else is naming, of holding a position under pressure, all of that can be practiced in every meeting you're already in. And you know what? Your life is actually going to be easier if you do this in any meeting. The leader who is consistently in her team meetings, in her peer group, in her interactions with her manager, building the muscle of high quality listening, investing in those relationships, asking the right questions, knowing how to explain what she's done in terms of the ask right up front, the headline, all those pieces. You're building the muscle that means you're ready for those higher stakes conversations. It is not dramatic. You just need to start working on it today. Now let's talk specifically about those of you who are thinking about doing this from a fractional perspective. Being a non-executive director, maybe this is your non-core career. This isn't maybe an addition to your main chapter in your corporate career, but you've reached the point where you're like, I want to do fractional leadership, and I know that's going to involve a board level interaction. The good news is that the skills and behaviors we've been discussing, everything up until now, the ability to synthesize complex information, the framing of the right questions, the ability to bring perspectives that help people think differently rather than just informing them. That's what you need, irrespective of whether this is a fractional executive role or a board level advisory role. You probably have more of this than you think if you're considering a fractional career. The work here is to know which capabilities you need to be developing, and specifically 3 things to be thinking about here. Number 1, translating your experience into board level language. The language of the board is different from the language of a functional leader, and certainly that of a fractional leader. When you've done your job in a particular career, the decisions you've navigated, the crises you've managed, the organizations you've built or transformed needs to be described in terms of strategic questions it has equipped you to help others answer. You want to avoid, I led a team of 150 engineers, and instead say, I've navigated the organizational and technical complexity of scaling engineering capacity through periods of rapid growth, and I've learned specifically where the risks and failure points are. That second version is what a board wants to know. They do not need to know you've led 150 engineers. That is irrelevant to a board. They're going to hire somebody who has done that. Secondly, you need to be findable for the right roles. Board appointments and fractional executive roles are almost never filled through formal job applications. They don't exist as jobs in that sense. They're filled through networking, through referrals, through people who already know you and think of you when the need arises, which means the most important work is not positioning a resume or polishing yourself in some way. It's making sure the right people know what you do and what you're available for. That means making your thinking visible, being present in the right conversations, and being explicit with the people in your network about the kind of advisory and fractional work you're open to. I've covered a lot of detail on fractional roles in 3 episodes earlier this year, episodes 284, 288, and 289. Go check out the show notes for those links. But back to item number 3 here for the fractional leader. You need to have a portfolio of evidence. So when you start out, this won't exist, but you're going to build it quickly. Board members and organizations hiring fractional executives want to understand your track record in high-stakes, complex situations. The evidence they're looking for is specific, not a list of responsibilities, but a set of situations where your judgment demonstrably made a difference. Building that portfolio, identifying the 3 to 5 situations in your career that's most clearly demonstrate your capacity for the kind of thinking that boards really value, and being able to describe them with precision and clarity is probably the most important preparation you can invest time in order for people to decide that you are the right fractional leader to join this non-executive director board position. Okay, let's talk about where to get started. What can you do? Because I've talked about a lot of different things. Where should we get going here? Being a trusted advisor to a board is not about waiting until you're senior enough or credentialed enough to be experienced enough. It's about developing the specific set of habits starting today, a specific communication approach, and a specific relationship that means that you are investing in people in your career, all of which you can start right now. If you're actively working towards a C-suite, the most important work is the communication piece. Stop leading with the what, start leading with the so what, the implication, the choice, and the headline. Practice it in every high-stakes room you're already in, so it's available automatically. It's just how you talk next time you're available for a board discussion or somebody from the board comes to speak to you. You'll find as you progress in your career, if there are boards in the company, that there will be times when particularly senior people just get to work with board members. And that's your massive opportunity for you to demonstrate you have that board level communication. If you're building towards a fractional or non-executive director role, the most important work is translation and visibility. Make sure you've translated your experience into the language of strategic contribution. Make your thinking visible to the people who need to know you exist, and be explicit about what you're available for. And if you're earlier in your career, congratulations for being here, because this is the most important time to do this work. This is not a future topic. The seeds you plant today will compound. So start by learning to read the room above yours. Start speaking in strategic language. Build those cross-functional relationships. Do the board visible work. Volunteer for the thing that is board visible rather than the thing that's most exciting. Practice intellectual honesty. 5 years of those habits will put you in a completely different position from the leader who's just starting to think about this today, but is already in the C-suite, or is having a C-suite conversation already. The room you're in is not the only room you're in. The room you're not in yet is as far away as it feels because you aren't thinking the right way. The work that gets you in the room that you want to be in is changing how you think. If this is resonating with you, if you can see the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and you want to think through how to close it specifically in the context of your experience, your career, and your next move, then let's have a conversation about that. Every month I have a limited number of strategy calls to listen to this podcast. They do run out. So head over to tonicollis.com/let's-chat. Link will be in the show notes. And if that's what you're after, let's discuss how to position you for that board level credibility, what it looks like in your specific situation, and how to map out your path to it. Remember, until next time, keep leading and keep changing the world. Bye for now.